So, like, Manwë is the one who condemned, like, the Noldor because of the kinslaying. Mondos is the one who actually was like, this is your judgment, suck it, to the Noldor. Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel, and welcome to my YouTube project, Makeup and Middle-earth Monday, a show where I do a makeup look and talk about a topic I picked out from the Tolkien Legendarium. Some quick housekeeping before I get started. This is going to be a little bit shorter of a video, I think, so I can kind of cram this in at the beginning here. But my channel has 41 subscribers at the time of recording this video, which is insane to me that there are 41 people who actually are willing to like sit through me rambling. I thought there would be like 2 people interested in watching me do this. So the fact that there's 41 of you is amazing. So I think 50 seems like a good landmark. If we can make it to 50 subs, Sten is going to help me produce a meme reaction video. So if that interests you, tell your friends, share my stuff, and when we hit 50, we can make that happen. Today's makeup look is going to be from Vanguard LARP again. If you're curious about them, please check out the link in the description box. I'm doing an NPC makeup look today. This character was a demon lord-like antagonist that showed up at game back in like the summer months, and oh my god, I was so sweaty. But it was a lot of fun. The final look involves like a partial mask, but I'm still gonna do like a full face just because at game my mask got knocked off during combat, and that's nobody's fault. That just happens. I should have tied it on a little bit more securely, but I felt better since it got knocked off that I still had like makeup on. So yeah, I'm gonna do a full face, but I'll still have like the final like look, I guess, anyway, at the end of the video, since that's kind of what we do here. This is also, I think, gonna be my first video that is like normal people makeup and not body paint. So if you wanted to see what I do for contouring with like normal foundation, then this is your video, I guess. I mean, I don't know, normal people. Today's topic is the Valar, or the holy powers of Arda that governed and gave form to Middle-earth. It was chosen by my friends on Facebook for my Facebook page's poll. If you want to contribute your opinion on future topics, please consider checking out my Facebook page. I have a link in the description box below. Anyway, let's get started. The Valar are mentioned in the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy, but they're not, like, we don't really get an explanation for what they actually are. So I know I had like no idea what they were when I first saw Lord of the Rings back when like they first came out, because I didn't read the books. I think I was like 10 when the movies came out, so I had no idea what the Valar were until I started reading fan fiction back in like the early 2000s, I guess. And I don't know if you were on fanfiction.net back then, but I feel like that was kind of like the wild west of fandom, because you could just write whatever and nobody would, like, you might get flamed, but like it was just, you could do whatever you wanted and there was like no moderation at all. So I don't know, back in the early 2000s, I was reading fan fiction, and there was this one specific fanfic that had me Googling all these names that I had no idea the meaning of. So if you're watching this video and you have no clue what the Valar are, I'm here today to save you from that fate. My favorite Tolkien Legendarium fanfic is the one that introduced me to the Valar, and essentially the plot of it is the Varda, who is the queen of the Valar, and Morgoth, who is the villain of the First Age. You know, like I just did a video on him, go watch that. They're playing a game, it's called the Game of the Gods, and Morgoth makes up Mary Sue OCs, and Varda just like lets the natural laws of Middle-earth kill them. I think it's my favorite fanfic. Like, it's really good. I'll post a link to it in the description if you want to, like, get in on some, like, peak early 2000s fandom cringe. They even have a chapter where they, like, redeem the sue of that chapter. Yeah, so that was my introduction to the Silmarillion, was this fanfic. It's such a good fanfic, honestly. It's good. It's good. So the Valar. So, as with a lot of my video content lately, the Valar are another one of those things that get explained really well in the Silmarillion. I'm going to try to go over the Valar kind of, not like list them off. I'm going to try to just kind of like do it in an organic way, because I feel like listing like name after name after name with like power after power after power is not going to be super easy to digest. So I'm gonna go a little bit into history of Middle-earth, but like I'm gonna try not to go like super duper into it, because I have covered it in other videos and like it can be a little overwhelming, I think. But essentially the Valar were present in this place called the Timeless Halls, which was the place that existed before time existed. And the Valar were all created by this character, Eru Ilúvatar, the one god. And he created the Valar as spirits within this timeless realm, using different parts of his own mind to create them, give them a purpose, give them personality, give them their own abilities. So the first of these spirits was Melkor and Melkor's brother Manwë. Melkor received the most parts of Eru's mind and was, like, in theory, the most alike to him, but Manwë, on the other hand... Okay, so Manwë was the only Valar to... Like, once Middle-earth was formed, he was the only one to actually still, like, take counsel directly from Eru Ilúvatar. So he was pretty important. So you have Melkor, who in theory was the one most alike him in mind. Manwë was the one who most understood his mind. And so during, like, this time before time, Eru created the rest of the Ainur, which came in two categories. The Valar, which is what we're talking about today, and the Maiar, which were like lesser spirits, served or worked under the Valar, and those are characters like the wizards were originally Maiar, the Balrogs were Maiar, and Sauron, the villain of Lord of the Rings, was a Maia. So there's some range there as far as powers are concerned. But that's not this video. This video is about the Valar. During this time where they were in the Timeless Halls before the physical world began, Melkor would like frequently dip out into the void trying to find this thing called the Flame Imperishable, which I mentioned in his own episode, in the Morgoth episode, but he believed that this was the source of Eru's power, and he wanted it for himself, because not understanding that this power, the Flame Imperishable, like the spark of creation, was part of Eru Ilúvatar, so there was no way that Melkor could get a hold of it. But he didn't understand that, so he did that, and like in the process, the fact that he ventured out into the void so much and spent a lot of time there, he started to really develop quite differently mentally from the other Valar and from the other Ainur. Also, Liv did my nails today. This character makeup, this character has like claw nails, like kind of like an almond nail, but I don't want to glue nails onto my hand at 8:25 p.m. after being at school all day, so I'm not gonna, but just, this is the color, so just use your imagination. So he creates these spirits, Eru does, and this leads us into where else but the Ainulindale, the infamous chapter that scares everybody away from the Silmarillion. Don't worry, I'm going to make the info dump easy to digest. I hope that I have in my previous videos too. We always come back here because what do you know? The creation story is relevant in the Bible of Lord of the Rings. But the Ainulindale, or the music of the Ainur, was the song that Eru, the one god, used to form the physical world. So he directed the Ainur in like a conductor, and together they all sang this song of creation that Eru had mapped out for them. Melkor, though, wanted to do his own thing, so he started singing a discordant theme, and eventually some of the Maiar actually started like singing along with him instead of along with the music that Eru had come up with. So this goes on until like they are singing like two completely different songs, and Eru introduces a second movement that is kind of meant to combat Melkor, and he actually uses the voice of Manwë, Melkor's brother, for this theme, and it goes on well enough, but eventually Melkor manages to overpower it, and so then they go into a third theme, and after this is when Eru like calls a stop to the music, and he's basically like, he tells Melkor that Melkor ain't shit. I think we're far enough into the video that I can curse now, and nothing he ever does is going to be able to match the glory of Eru Ilúvatar's creation, and anything that Melkor does is only going to eventually serve to make Eru's creation better. And I went over this in Morgoth's video, but this is, you know, sowing the seed of discontent, I guess. You know, obviously Melkor didn't like that very much, being very prideful. So after Eru's mic drop moment, and he just kind of leaves Melkor to stew, and eventually Eru returns, and he shows the Ainur a vision of the world that he intends for them to cultivate. Obviously this vision is of the physical world that they just sang the music to create, and the vision essentially reveals to them that the music that they have been making has had a point, and the point was what created the physical realm that the Ainur are able to anchor themselves to. And so during this point, Melkor realizes that everything he did is, you know, reflected in this creation that they just sang into existence, and it looks pretty good, and he's kind of pissed about that. After Eru shows them all this vision, he shows them a second vision, and this vision is of the children of Ilúvatar, the Eldar and the Edain, aka the elves and men. And I think it's around this point of the Ainulindale that one of the more influential Valar is brought up. Ulmo is the Vala of the waters, and his name means pourer or rainer in Quenya. His dominion is pretty much every area of water, so the sea, rivers, streams. Water is supposed to be supposedly the most similar to the true music of Eru, so his dominion is pretty important. And sea longing is a really common theme in Tolkien, especially with elf characters, but it's also like been seen in the Valar too. Like it's a very common theme, and so, you know, it makes sense to me that the Vala in charge of the water is important if sea longing is such a prevalent theme. But Melkor also always feared the sea because it can't be tamed. Like, you can't tame the seas, and Ulmo is a lot like the sea in that way. Apparently he was like pretty frightening to elves and men. Like, if he actually just showed up, he was kind of terrifying. He would appear in like dreams and visions instead, like when he had information to give to them, and he's actually known for being like one of the more friendly of the Valar towards elves, especially. Like, they like him a lot. It's just that when he shows up, it's kind of like, ugh. And he was described as having a really tall, like, silver crown and hair that shimmered like sea foam. He's actually the one that gave Turgon the vision that prompted him to build the hidden city of Gondolin. He also gave a similar vision to Finrod, Galadriel's brother, and by association, like with the construction of Gondolin, we can also kind of associate Morgoth's ultimate downfall with Ulmo, because it was a scion of Turgon's family line that was eventually responsible for Morgoth's defeat. So, you know, that's pretty cool. What time is it? It's 1 o'clock. So, after Eru had finished showing the Ainur these visions, this is when time begins. The Valar descend into this newly made physical plane, and thanks to the Ainulindala, they all discover their basic purpose, essentially. They all have, like, a basic understanding of the past, present, and future of this world, but Eru Ilúvatar only showed them, like, a piece of this past, present, and future. He didn't show them the entire picture. He left a lot of it for them specifically to fill in with their own thought process. Basically, you know, like the concept of free will. So they knew what the purpose was, but he gave them the means to figure out, like, how to accomplish it themselves. Because when they descend into the physical world, they find it completely without shape or form. It's waiting for them to decide how to make it appear. It's at this point that Melkor decided to declare himself king of Ea, Ea being the name of, like, the physical world, because he just thinks he's, like, you know, he thinks he's hot shit. He thinks he's the coolest and the bestest, but the other Valar essentially, like, they just vote him off the island, and they elect his brother Manwë king instead, because Manwë's just better. He's nice, he's honest, he's a hard worker, he's compassionate. What is Melkor? A dick, that's what. And since he doesn't get his way, he throws his little tantrum and just does everything in his power to interfere with the other Valar while they're trying to make Middle-earth ready for the children of Eru Ilúvatar to arrive. So, this being the reflection of the part of the Ainulindala when Ilúvatar used Manwë's voice to combat Melkor's activity in the second song. We see that here with Manwë being elected king of the Valar to try to do their job while Melkor gets in the way. What a dickhead. But yeah, so I'm gonna go into Manwë now, since it's a good segue, since he's just been elected king. Manwë is king of the Valar, and after Melkor, he is the most powerful of all of the Valar. Like I said, he's the only one that's ever been shown to take direct counsel from Eru Ilúvatar himself, and he is the one who best understands the mind of Ilúvatar. So obviously they were like, well, yeah, he should be king. He was described as having blue eyes and wearing blue robes. Later on, from the beginning of creation, when the Valar end up going to establish Valinor, he ruled from this mountain peak called Mount Taniquetil. That's Quenya Elvish for high snow peak. It was the highest peak in the entire world. Like, it was so high up that, like, he could look out and see, like, everything. When the Noldor committed the kinslaying, Manwë was the one to declare their exile, and he used his powers to make Valinor actually impossible for them to return to unless they had essentially, like, proven themselves worthy of forgiveness, which happens for a few characters, but not all of them. Not the sons of Feanor, that's for damn sure. And Manwë holds dominion over the skies and wind and storms, so he's kind of like Zeus, I guess. If he was Zeus, but, like, not trying to lay dick like railroad track all the damn time. Also, another kind of trait that he shares with Zeus is that eagles are associated with him, and if you know anything about Lord of the Rings, the giant eagles, those are Manwë's eagles. He's the one who, quote unquote, devised them. And they serve him by keeping an eye on whatever is going on in Middle-earth. Later on, after we get past the Valiant years and the years of the trees, when we actually get into like the first, second, and third age, Manwë's eagles kind of work as his messengers. Then their eyesight supposedly is so keen they can see through like physical objects and darkness. The only thing they weren't able to see through was like the blackness of Morgoth's vaults, like in his fortresses later on. Now, of course, we come to it. The question that exasperates everyone who loves the text.
Why didn't the eagles carry the Fellowship into Mordor so that they could just fly in and drop the ring in Mount Doom?
I feel like this question has been answered so much, or like has been asked so much, that it's kind of just a meme at this point, and I don't know that anybody actually wonders this anymore. But on the off chance that this question has plagued you and you simply do not know the answer, there's a couple reasons. First of all, the Fellowship, the entire point of their errand was that it was a secret, because Sauron just couldn't fathom the idea that someone would want to destroy the Ring of Power. It was a secret so that nobody knew they were trying to destroy it. I don't know about you, but personally, I don't think that giant eagles flying across the sky carrying people in their talons is particularly low-key. I feel like people would notice that. So there's one reason why. Another good reason is just for the fact that, like, Mordor defends itself. It's a volcanic wasteland. Yeah, the sky is covered in, like, black clouds, and also, you know, whatever kind of, like, poisonous fumes are venting up from Mount Doom. Not to mention the fact that the Nazgul can fly, and they, like, the eagles were eventually able to rescue Sam and Frodo because they had already destroyed the ring, and they had already, like, wrecked Sauron, and the Nazgul were fucked up. Like, if they tried to just fly in when the Nazgul are at full strength in their home base, I don't know about that. Anyway, this is a little bit of a tangent, but anyway, Manwë was married to Varda, and Varda is Quenya for sublime or lofty. Varda was also called Elbereth by the elves. That's Sindarin for Queen of the Stars. She was supposedly the most beautiful of all of the Valar, to the point where she was so beautiful that mortals couldn't even describe her beauty. That's how beautiful she was. Like, the light of Eru Ilúvatar supposedly, like, radiated from her face. Unsurprisingly, Morgoth hated her. And she also hated him. Like, before everything, it was on site for her. She was like, you're up to no good. I don't trust you. And her dominion is light, so you can imagine how much he disliked her. She's the one who hung, like, all the stars in the sky. And she's also the one who, when they made, like, the first lights that they put on, like, pillars in Middle-earth and had, like, lamps, she's the one who filled the lamps with fire. She also, later on, is the one who puts the sun and the moon on their course across the sky. That's way later, obviously, but she did that, and then she's also the one who put the Star of Eärendil in the sky after the War of Wrath, which is way, way later. Also, fun fact, when Sam Gamgee fights Shelob and uses Galadriel's file to make a light to scare off the giant spooter, Varda is the one who actually answers his prayer and gives him that light, which I think is kind of neat. So yeah, so obviously, like I said, Melkor hated her like the most of all the Valar because of her dominion being light and the fact that she did not trust him. Elves really love her though, and I know the format of this show is not great for excerpts, but I am going to read one in this episode just because it's just this really beautiful elvish hymn, and I think it's friggin' awesome. It's in iambic pentameter, so like he actually wrote this hymn in elvish in iambic pentameter, so it sounds great. And if you've watched the extended version of The Fellowship, then you've heard this because it's the song that the elves are singing when, like, Sam and Frodo are still in the Shire and they're, like, getting ready to leave. But I love it, so I'm just gonna read it, and sorry. But it goes, A Elbereth Gilthoniel, Silivren Penna Miriel, Omenel Aglar Elenath, Na Chaired Palan Diriel, Fanuilos Len Linnathon, Nef Ayer si Nef Ayeron, A Elbereth Gilthoniel, Omenel Palan Diriel, Lenalon si din Guruthos a Tironin Fanuilos, which essentially translates to, O Elbereth Star Kindler, white glittering, slanting falls, sparkling like jewels, from the firmament the glory of the starry host, having gazed afar into remote distance, from the tree-tangled middle lands, ever white, to thee I will chant, on this side of the ocean, here on this side of the great ocean, O Elbereth Star Kindler, from the heavens gazing afar, to thee I cry, here beneath the shadow of death, O look towards me, ever white. I thought that was really pretty, so. And like I said, I'm not going to go like super into a bunch of the history in this episode because I feel like I've covered it pretty well in like previous episodes. But the gist of it is that Melkor pretty much throws a tantrum when he doesn't get his way, which is what he always does when he doesn't get his way, and Manwë becomes king instead of him. So Melkor starts trying to ruin everything the other Valar are trying to do. They make a mountain, he knocks it down. They make a valley, he turns it into a mountain. They make a lake, he drains all the water out. You get the idea. Eventually, another Valar named Tulkas, which is Quenya for strong or steadfast, descends into Ea in, quote, a fury of laughter, and he basically got tired of watching Melkor be a dick to everybody. Tulkas was the most warlike of the Valar. He was described as having a ruddy complexion and a yellow beard, and he literally fought with just his fists. He is like the most Chad of all the Valar, ready to like throw hands at any given moment. And he throws his hands at Melkor, and Melkor just completely nopes out of the physical realm and back into like the void for a while because he cannot handle Tulkas. While Melkor is gone, the Spring of Arda is allowed to happen, and this just means that the Valar were able to finally like do what they wanted to shape Middle-earth. And this is the point where the first trees and plants begin to grow. The Vala Yavanna, which is Quenya for giver of fruits, is the one who planted the seeds to grow like the first like plants of Arda, and she is the Vala of growing things. Her part of the Ainulindale was a song of forests and trees. She also is the one who created the shepherds of the forests, or the shepherds of the trees, aka the Ents. She created them because she was afraid that like all of her like growing creations would be destroyed or taken advantage of, since like, you know, trees can't typically run away from people trying to chop them down. I mean, you know, usually. So when Melkor eventually returned to Arda at this point, Yavanna actually knew, because when he came and like built his fortress at Utumno in like the north, all of the plant life in that area started to die because of the corruption of his presence like in that fortress. And then later on, when Melkor destroys the first lights of the two lamps, Yavanna is actually the one who grows the two trees that take up like the role of providing light, Lorelys and Telperion. Though they provided light to the Undying Lands, but not really to Middle-earth. But Yavanna was the one to create them, and she was actually married to Aule, which is Quenya for invention. He was the Vala of smithing. Aule is also the Vala who created the lamps for the lights that Varda filled with fire. So she filled them with the fire. Aule was the one who actually created the lamps themselves. He also later, much later, was actually the one who created the dwarves, which I think is kind of cool. He basically got like so stoked for the children of Iluvatar to come. He really wanted somebody to like teach all his neat like, smithing skills to, so he was like, okay, well, I'm gonna make my own. And he made He made the dwarves. But because he's a Valar, he's not Eru, he doesn't have the light of the flame imperishable. He can't actually create life. He can only create like a simulacrum of life, which is what he made. So he made them, you know, and they were basically like, well, like automatons, kind of. But Eru was like, I know I told y'all that I was going to be making these things. What are you doing? And Aule was like, oh shit. And was like, yeah, I'm sorry, you know, I just thought I wanted to teach somebody something neat. And then he, like, raises his hammer to, like, destroy them because he thinks that Iluvatar wants them destroyed because they weren't part of his plan. But as he, like, raises his hammer to destroy them, like, the fathers of the dwarves all, like, kind of, like, cringe away from him. And it's, like, in that action that Aule realizes that Iluvatar has adopted the dwarves as his surrogate children, and that they are actually going to be accepted, like, in creation as their own people. But Iluvatar puts the dwarves to sleep because the firstborn are supposed to be the elves. So the elves are the firstborn children of Iluvatar. So until they are permitted to, like, awake, then Aule's dwarves have to sleep until after the elves come. So there you go. And, like, you know, I think it's kind of neat. Like, when he made the dwarves, he made them, like, specifically, like, stubborn and, like, really hardy because he wanted them to be protected from Melkor. Like, he wanted them to be resilient enough that they would be able to survive in an environment where Melkor was a factor because of all the problems that Melkor had been causing. Dwarves actually believe that when they die, they go to the halls of Aule. They don't call him Aule. They call him Mahal, which essentially is Kuzdul for creator. But now you know. My gods are your gods. All gods, one god. Coexist. Ironically, though, I think it's interesting because two of Aule's most powerful followers were named Myron and Kurumo, who you may recognize by their Third Age names Sauron and Saruman. So they were both Maiar who worked under Aule that ended up turning towards evil. But Aule was actually also the Valar who was supposedly the most similar to Melkor in, like, mind. It was just that, unlike Melkor, he didn't have that self-destructive pride. So when he was creating the dwarves, he realized he had gone against Iluvatar's wishes. Aule immediately repented and was like, I didn't mean it, you know, I wanted somebody to, like, teach cool stuff to. So Melkor was a little bit sad that he couldn't corrupt somebody from the Valar, but, you know, it sucks to suck Melkor. So the Valar finish forming Middle-earth, and they make their first official home on this island called Almaren. And it's in this lake that is, like, between the two lamps of the first lights that they put up. They have a celebration, and during the celebration is also when Tulkas gets married to Nessa. Nessa means young in Quenya, and she kind of reminds me of Artemis from, like, the Greek pantheon, except she's married. She was said to be wild, and she loved dancing, and she was, like, so swift she could run faster than any deer, you know, and she was the sister of Orome, who was the Vala of the Hunt, so there's that association. Orome, you may remember from previous videos, is the Vala who first discovered the elves. When they awoke in Cuivienen, Orome was the one who first realized that they were there. He came to Middle-earth to go hunting, and there they were. He was also known to have, like, followers and pets along with him on his hunts to, like, kill evil creatures. So he was very active in combating Melkor's influence in Middle-earth when Melkor came back. Even, like, before and after the Valar gave up on Almaren and went to make Valinor. Orome was married to Vanna, who was actually the sister of Yavanna, who is, you know, the fruit lady. Vanna like her sister, was associated with plants and growing things. She was particularly associated with flowers, and she actually was like known for just like being clothed in flowers. And she dressed her sister-in-law Nessa also in flowers for Nessa's wedding with Tulkas, which you may remember I just said was happening during their celebration for having completed their work on Middle-earth. I wonder if anything's gonna go wrong. Oh wait, we don't have to wonder, because Melkor shows up and ruins the day. He knocks down both of the lights, spills like all the fire from the lights everywhere, marring the creation that the Valar just finished putting together. He's a fucking dick. And he does this because Tulkas is distracted because he's just gotten married and they're celebrating, and he kind of like, Tulkas like falls asleep, so he starts napping, and that's when Melkor strikes, when Tulkas is not paying attention. Ain't that just the way? So yeah, at that point the Valar are just like, fuck it, we'll try something else, and they leave. And this is when they go across the sea and create Valinor, which is Quenya for land of the Valar. And Valinor is actually part of a continent. It's not the entire continent, which is maybe, I think, a little confusing. But the entire continent is Aman. And on Aman you have Valinor, the land of the Valar, and then the areas, like, that aren't part of that. And so one of them is like the harbors of the Teleri elves, and then the north, like, icy wastes area that I might get into in a minute. That's what it is. But in Valinor, each of the Valar has like their own little domain. So like Yavanna had, like, on the south of the island, like, she had pastures. Orome had, like, his woods to the north of Yavanna's pastures, and his woods were, like, full of creatures to hunt. Another of the Valar was Nienna, which is Quenya for weeping. She who weeps. Nienna was one of only 2 Valar who weren't actually married. The other being Ulmo, who I guess did not have time for that. Nienna's only real physical description is that she wore a gray hood, and Nienna's halls were on the western shore of Valinor, looking out, like, towards the edge of the world, basically. She's the Vala of grief. She basically just cries all the time. She just cries all the time because of all the sad shit that happens in Middle-earth, and that's what she does. When the 2 trees were created, she watered them with her tears. She's also the Vala of compassion, though. She's actually where Gandalf, who was also a Maya, learned pity from. He learned pity from her. And when the 2 trees were destroyed by Melkor and Ungoliant, Nienna is actually the one who, when she cried on the trees, they produced like one last fruit and one last blossom, respectively, that became the sun and the moon. Or like, that got put in, they got put in vessels to become the sun and the moon. So, that's what she does. She cries and is sad because there's a lot of sad shit going on in the world. And you know what, girl? Same. South of the halls of Nienna were the halls of her brother, Mandos, which the halls of Mandos are where the spirits of the dead go. Elves, that's where their spirits go when they die. Mandos is also called Namo, and he resided in these halls with his wife Vaide. Mandos was in charge of governing the dead and the judgment of, not just the dead, but of all elven souls. He was in charge of the judgment of all elven souls. He's also the judge of the Valar, like, generally speaking, I guess. He's the one who actually pronounced the judgments that Manwë made. So, like, Manwë is the one who condemned, like, the Noldor because of the kinslaying. Mandos is the one who actually was like, this is your judgment, suck it, to the Noldor. And the Morgoth, you know, and etc. On the topic of inspirations, like, I see him very much inspired by Hades from the Greek pantheon, because, you know, he goes by the name of the place that he presides over. He's the judge of the dead. It's a story that's very much inspired by Orpheus and Eurydice, where Beren and Luthien, during the Beren and Luthien story, Beren dies and Luthien passes away because her heart is broken, and she arrives at the halls of Mandos, and she wants Beren so that they can be together, so she sings before Mandos, and this is the one and only time that he bends the rules for anybody, because he's moved to pity by, like, the beauty of her music. With Manwe's permission, Mandos lets Beren and Luthien return to the land of the living together, and he is also the one who gives Eärendil and Elwing and all of their descendants the choice, because they're both half-elves, he's the one who gives them the choice to be counted among the men or the elves when they die. And that's what the half-elven bloodlines, like the characters who are half-elven, that's where that choice comes from, that they're allowed to... I know this looks terrible, but it'll be better in a minute. That's what allows them to decide whether or not they want to be an elf or be counted among the men and die that way. And Mandos' wife is Vaire, which is Quenya for weaver. You may have noticed that a lot of the names sound like they are shaped. That's because these are all titles rather than names. There's a bit in the text during my research that I found that was talking about how, like, the Valar are named by titles. Their true names aren't ever actually used, so these are all, like, titles, like this, like what they do. And Vaire, the weaver, she wove tapestries of, like, the many events and deeds of Middle-earth, and they covered, like, the walls in the halls of Mandos over the ages, which I think is kind of cool. East of the halls of Mandos was the only great lake we know of in Valinor, Lake Lorelin, and in the middle of this lake was the Isle of Este, where the Vala, Este, slept. Like, she slept during the day. She was the Vala most responsible for the healing of, like, the tired and injured. She lived, like, when she was awake in Lorien, not that one, with her husband Irmo. The fountains in Lorien were said to rejuvenate people from weariness. Lothlorien in Middle-earth, where Galadriel and Celeborn ended up ruling for a while that most people know of, it was actually named after this Lorien in Valinor. The Lorien in Valinor was considered to be the most beautiful place in the entire world, in, like, all of creation. And like Mandos, Irmo was also called Lorien. They're also brothers. Irmo in Quenya actually means desirer or master of desires, and he was the lord of dreams and visions. And north of Lorien was Aule's home, and that's where he had his forges. And then northeast of Aule's area was actually where Varda and Manwe lived together. And when the continent of Aman was raised, Valinor itself was surrounded on three sides by just, like, huge mountains, just gigantic mountains. And these were called the Pelori Mountains. And then on the northern edge, where they weren't surrounded by mountains, there was this icy area, and then there was, like, a northeastern pass that actually led to the Helcaraxe, and this plays a part later on. It's this huge, like, glacial desert of just, like, ice wastes. That's actually where the second half of the Noldor host had to travel through during the, like, when the Noldor fled from Valinor after they were pursuing Melkor for murdering their king and for stealing the Silmarils. It's through that northern pass that the second host had to go through. Also, fun fact, at the time of Valinor's foundation, the earth was actually flat. It didn't become a globe until the fall of Numenor in the Second Age, because when the Numenorians tried to invade Valinor, the Valar basically gave up their governance of Middle-earth because they weren't really supposed to interfere in the affairs of men. So elves were like the domain of the Valar. Men were purely the dominion of Eru Ilúvatar, because when men die, Eru is the only one who really knows where their souls go. So when they tried to invade Valinor, the Valar basically gave up their guardianship and were like, yeah, Dad, help. That's when Eru came to the rescue and basically took the world and reshaped it. He bent it and rounded it and pounded it up, and then it became a globe. The more you know. So before that happened, like when it was flat, those who like weren't banished for the evil deeds that they've committed, like the Noldor for, you know, the kinslaying, were still actually able to sail to Valinor. It wasn't until like later into the Second Age, during the fall of Numenor, that it changed. And then after like the Earth became a globe, then the only people who like already knew how to get to Valinor, who knew how to sail the straight road, could actually reach it. This is when you get folks like Círdan the Shipwright, who arguably the greatest Chad of all the Cinder, honestly, who still knew how to actually sail the straight road to get there. Pop these ears on real quick, but yeah, that's the Valar. It was a pretty easy episode. What did you think? Did you learn something new? Let me know in the comments. What's your favorite? Who's your favorite Valar? Who sounded the coolest to you? That's the look. I kind of based this character's personality off of like a Drukhari lord, if you're into 40k. That should probably tell you all you really need to know about how evil we are. But I had a lot of fun putting this together, and I'm really honestly like very grateful that they gave me this role, because it's been a lot of fun, and I'm very excited for the conclusion whenever that ends up happening. Now that we've reached the end, it's time for a little segment that I like to call Metal Music Monday. This is where I recommend a song from my metal playlist. Maybe we like the same music, maybe it's new to you. Either way, I hope you enjoy it. The song of the week is Megiddo by Ex Libris. This is another like excellent face-melting guitar solo kind of vibe. The song has a really great energy, and like I love it. Please check it out. I have headbanged to this song so many times because it effing slaps. I love jamming to this song. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our time together. I know I did. But even if you didn't, I appreciate you giving me the chance. If you did enjoy, I would love it if you gave me a like or left me a comment, or even if you clicked that subscribe button. And until next time, I'm out of here.